Yeah.
Folks, we are on with Rhiannon Carnes, who is the executive director at Ohio Women's Alliance, an organization that she founded. She is at the helm with a bunch of other incredible folks doing the work. One of them I see in the chat, Jordan. I know that some of y'all, if you're at all familiar with the reproductive justice space, you've seen Jordan, you've seen Rhiannon. They've been everywhere. As well as other folks on the staff and other people in Ohio because of, as Rhiannon mentioned, the great work happening in Ohio. And so, really honored to have you here. Want to start just like I want people to get a chance to get to know you a little bit and understand kind of how you came to reproductive justice work. So anything that you want to share about yourself and about that journey, I want to make sure people kind of get to know you a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So I came to community organizing is kind of where I started out at the local level. I started doing work in 2016. I think, just like so many other shared experiences, I was definitely outraged at that time, just the attacks on women's reproductive rights, as well as the attacks on people who are, racially oppressed. And but prior to that, I was in the military. In the Air Force. I also spent years in the healthcare industry. I practiced as a respiratory therapist and healthcare administrator. And so I had a lot of experiences within just my own reproductive health experiences, as well as being in situations where there wasn't a lot of representation for women, especially women of color and Black women. And so the work was personal for me. I'm also a mom. I have three children biologically that are mine. I've been an adoptive parent before. I also have bonus children. I'm newly married a couple years, but I have bonus kids. And so, my reproductive journey is very expansive and diverse. And so this was an issue that was important to me. And so when I first started OWA, just from my own experiences, I realized there wasn't a space that really invested in women of color, Black women who really wanted to be intentional about the work that needed to be done in our community. There wasn't spaces that really invested in our leadership. There was no blueprint to show us, the way, especially when it comes to building an organization. And so the founding premise of OWA is really rooted in making sure that we are equipping leaders in our community, people who really want to step up and make a difference and change, and that they have the resources, the skill set to be able to thrive in the work that they are doing. Because so many, like I said, there's so many incredible Black women in our state that's doing just the good work, and we may not know of each other, and or maybe even like the hardships. I think so often we're uplifted when the work is great, and and the uplifting of the exceptionalism, of Black women, but there's struggle in that work too, and we need to be more transparent, but also making sure that we are. Um, Learning from our experiences and that people don't have to go through the same trauma and struggle that we went through. So I just, really want to make it more open and easier for people to step into their leadership.
Right. Yeah. I love that. And I think that's really important to underscore because I think that, while people say listen to Black women and let Black women lead, that is very hard for folks to actually put into practice and do. And I think that when we are equipped with the right supports and all the things that we need to lead, we do an amazing job. But we also are expected to sort of, I, I appreciate the term Black Girl Magic, but we are just like everybody else. We experience struggles just like everyone else, and we need the support to be able to do the work that we're so passionate about across the spectrum, because it's not just in reproductive justice, but there are so many Black women and women of color that are like carrying the torch and doing it quietly, like doing that stuff that nobody else wants to do, and they get up every day and they don't necessarily get recognition for that. So I appreciate you for speaking on that. Um, so for folks like us who have sort of worked in the reproductive freedom space for a while, because we are um, yesterday was the anniversary of the Dobbs decision. And so, folks like you and I who were like ringing the alarm for a really long time that this was going to happen, you and I talked about this. When it actually did happen, it felt so crushing. Like, even though we saw the writing on the wall, we saw the political article when the decision came down that abortion was, going back to the states to decide. um, it still felt very soul crushing. And so I wanna know from you, what did that moment mean for you to experience that?
Yeah, I mean, it was a devastating moment. To your point, we felt the attacks over time, over the years. Many of us had been doing the work, been showing up, been literally screaming and yelling, at the mountaintops. But to be in that actual moment, it really felt like I ran into a brick wall, like literally. I mean, I felt kind of like the what is it, flight or fright stage.
Mm-hmm.
That's exactly how
Fight
I
or flight.
yes, that's exactly how I felt. And in that moment, obviously, yes, I chose to fight, but I definitely had to pause for a moment. Words had escaped me. My emotions was just all over the place. I was just thinking about not just myself, but just the many people that decision would impact. And I just could not believe that these folks who I felt were so far removed from our everyday lives, and also people who would never understand what that experience would mean or feel like, were making decisions for us. And it was a devastating moment. Um, but I think it, created space for us to come together, build more collective power. Um, you know, that decision, and even just the attacks, even in our state, on reproductive rights, health, and justice, was meant to dismantle our organizations and tear us down and apart. But since then, in that short period of time, we've grown from just a staff of 3 to a staff of 9. So not only, did it do the opposite of what they thought their intentions were going to do, it actually created opportunity for us to thrive. And it also um, inspired and encouraged and outraged our members. And so that right there, enough in itself, just shows how the work that we've done, over these years, and continuing to beat that same drum as to why abortion access is so important, and the destigmatizing work in this space actually is working. I think too often when you're in this work, you you question your impact. You think your impact is very small, so minimum. But for me, it's a matter of I need to do something. It's just the answer is not do anything at all. And so no matter how small, I feel like my impact is, I know that there's at least one other person that feels the same way that I feel. And obviously it was thousands, because thousands, came together to turn out for us to pass the reproductive freedom amendment, which came later on down the road. But one of the things that I do want to emphasize is that when the Dobbs decision came, one of our first reactions was to make sure that we were taking care of ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
I think that as women of color, as Black women, we're nurturers and caretakers, at heart. And so for us, it was, how do we take care of our people, our community? And we launched our member assistance program, which is a practical care support fund for abortion seekers in our state, where they can receive transportation, lodging, childcare, and food stipends, and lost wages, for those who not only, as we understood the right to abortion, to be able to have that right, but making sure that they have access to obtain that right. And there's so many barriers that women of color face, and people who are in poverty levels. And those are the issues in the wraparound care that we offer our clients. And not only do we service abortion seekers in our state, we service those who come to Ohio because, you know, there's states that have gone dark that don't have access.
Mm-hmm.
Um, 31% of our clients come from out of state. And so, like we've said for so long, that it was not this decision and the overturn of Roe was never going to stop people from obtaining abortion. It was just going to create barriers, and more people travel than ever since that decision. So for us, it's about how can we continue to make sure that we are caring for those who are in need, doing that destigmatizing work because now this issue is just so politicized.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, people, are either in fear, don't know if it's legal and or not. And so we are here as that resource for them.
I appreciate you all for doing that destigmatization work because it's so important. We know that some of our politicians don't even want to say the word abortion, and that is like step one in order to destigmatize what is healthcare. Um, you mentioned taking care of yourself, and we mentioned that that was important when Dobbs fell. And so I saw that from a lot of people, like we need to take a step back and really like check in with ourselves about, because this is not only just our work, but this affects our lives, it affects our children's lives, it'll affect generations. And one of the things that I saw that happened out of that was, we know that and I came out of reproductive rights work as well as you did, and I realized that there was a level of inclusivity that I wanted to reach for in this work that I couldn't find there in the reproductive justice framework, is where I found that. And we know that, 12 Black women came together and created reproductive justice for that reason, because we were silenced on our issues. And so there has been some sort of like what feels like silos sometimes. And so I want to talk to you about why reproductive justice remains important in this moment, and how the Dobbs decision, particularly like in Ohio, how it fostered more coalition building and collaboration between organizations in a state like Ohio and in the movement in general.
Yes, absolutely. I think first I just really want to name the pillars of reproductive justice because I can't tell you how many people, even Black women and women of color who we know were the founders of this movement, still don't know what, full reproductive justice embodies.
Hmm.
It is the right to determine when to have a child and or not, the right to be able to raise your children in a healthy, sustainable environment, and also the right to autonomy and self-determination, which is so critical as it pertains, to the Dobbs decision and the fight here in Ohio. For so long, Black women and women of color were saying, the right is just simply not enough. Roe was not enough.
Right. Hmm.
And that, access needed to be strengthened and expanded. And in Ohio, when we did, launch our ballot measure, the language in our ballot measure was embodied the reproductive justice framework. It wasn't just abortion that we were protecting in the ballot measure, but it was also the right to continue pregnancy. It was also the right to contraception, the right to fertility treatment, and the right to miscarriage care. And so you need all of the resources and education and information to be able to make that, full uh, decision and for what is right for yourself, your body, and your family. And no one can make that decision but you and yourself. And so that is truly how we won the ballot measure, because we went a step forward beyond just the right to abortion. And I think that's just so important because that work was initiated and started and founded on the shoulders of Black women. Um, Even, myself, as a Black woman, when we launched the ballot measure, we did the traditional press statements and press releases and all that. I actually was out on maternity leave. And so that issue was close to my heart at the time. When the Dobbs decision dropped, I was pregnant.
Hmm.
and I was 44 and pregnant, so I was high risk, and being able to have access to abortion was definitely life saving care for me at that time if I had needed that form of care. And so I think for me in this work and stepping into it from a reproductive justice lens and framework is not just about just our ecosystem and our work, but this is my personal life. This is the life of my children as well. And so I feel um not only as I'm sitting here trying to follow the legacies of those Black women who've been doing that work, I feel that I also have an obligation to move that work and that torch forward. And so, yeah, I mean, we now see, I think many of our partners and, people who have these organizations that have been around for 100 plus years, these longstanding institutions that have really stood on the notion of just, the right to abortion are now understanding and embracing and encompassing the reproductive justice framework. But I think that we still need to make sure that we are paying homage and being humble and gracious and understanding to those who are still going to be the most oppressed in this work, and that we are amplifying them and lifting them up.
Hmm. And also like doing the outreach and one of the things that you mentioned about the ballot measure language was not just including abortion in that language. And I do think that as a strategy was both genuine to how it would land with, someone like myself or other black women, birthing people of color, how that language would land, right? And I think that it was instrumental in winning in Ohio because people felt as though their issues were being encompassed in that language versus it just being about the right to abortion. I want to talk a little bit more about that too, the ballot initiative. I know folks are curious because people are wanting to do this work across the nation, and I am traveling a lot, and folks always bring up Ohio, and they say, we thought that if y'all couldn't win, that was going to be the writing on the wall. That it would be so much more of a hill to climb, and so when it was codified into the Constitution in Ohio, it gave us hope that we could do this in other places. And so I want you to talk a little bit about what did it take? I was there
Yeah.
in August too, because
Mm.
there was some, in August there was the fight to even get it onto the ballot, right? And so I want you to talk to the people who are listening about what this whole thing kind of took.
Yeah. Um, so much. So much. Um,
And you mentioned you were pregnant and postpartum
that's right.
during this whole process.
That's right.
So shout out to
Yeah.
you
Thank
for that, just
you.
in and of itself.
Yes. Thank Um, yeah, it was a lot. Ohio has been a state, we were considered we're still a swing state. Um, People have tried to write us off as a swing state over these last several election cycles. I think what this ballot measure has demonstrated is that when we prioritize and center the issues of the people will show up, on the right side and also show up for progressive issues. Ohio was like, no, we're like any other state in the country. The majority of people in Ohio believe that we should have some right to abortion access. And we've been saying that time and time again, but we have a hostile legislature, we have gerrymandered districts, we are underrepresented in our state legislature. We have a trifecta where we have predominantly, red Republican um, legislature, governor, secretaries, you name it, right? We have been feeling like we've been losing power, but what we always knew was that we had the people power. We had the people on our side through and through over and over and over again. So we there was no mistake, in our just saying to the opposition over and over again, if we put this on the ballot, you will lose.
Hmm.
So, they knew it too, and they threw everything at us with the August special election that tried to increase the threshold to 60%, which is Florida is actually facing that right now, but they're polling over 60%. So shout out to them and the work that they're doing there. And then they also tried to, Ohio has 88 counties, and to get ballot to be on a ballot, you have to have signatures in at least 44 of those counties as it stands. But that August special was trying to increase the signature requirement to all 88 counties. Now, I'll tell you, we were prepared when we launched our ballot measure. We were um, doing the work out in the field with the intentions that anything that they threw at us, that we were still going to be able to overcome and fight. With the special August election, the Ohioans shot it down. They said, absolutely not. You can go somewhere with that. And so that was our first fight. And again, the turnout in that fight was unprecedented. They also had that fight. They put that on the ballot in August in the summertime, when they knew or they thought people would be distracted, or focusing on their children during the summertime and vacationing. But Ohioans were not distracted. They showed up. And then moving over, onward to the ballot, they showed up and showed out again. So, for us, it's moving forward with the ballot measure as well. It's about making sure that we are enacting and strengthening the will of the people, and fighting and voting to protect abortion access. And so right now for us, it's about the implementation of the ballot measure. We still have like 30 restrictions in Ohio on abortion. And, even though the people have spoken, those restrictions still remain in place. And so our partners are fighting uh, at the legal, they're doing their legal work that they do, making sure that those barriers are not in place or ineffective when it comes to abortion seekers. I will say, when in launching a ballot measure, it takes a lot of collaborative and collective work. Our folks in Ohio who, prioritize the reproductive rights, health, and justice space have been doing this work for a long time. We've been building partnerships for a long time. This type of work and this type of campaign is very expensive. It was national news. Um, that work doesn't happen by itself. And so you must be doing the pre work within your state before you launch a ballot measure. You must be collaborating and working with each other, understanding your own organizational strengths, what you bring to the table, your assets. And we can't just only be coming together during a crisis. We have to work together because each of our bodies of work reflect each other and support each other. And as you heard me mention, like I said, the reproductive rights, health, and justice space. So we all sit in different areas within this work, and all of our work intersects. What our partners do who really focus on the legislative issue in the reproductive rights space, their policies that they uplift and are fighting affect the direct services that we provide in our space, because we're not oppressed for no reason. Usually there's policies and legislations that have put us in those situations. And so we have to make sure that we are working together and understanding the full totality of what we need to be doing in our communities so we can obtain full reproductive freedom.
Absolutely. And I'm really happy that you pointed that out because I think that all of those pieces have to come together. It's important for us, when I'm thinking about this work and thinking about the Just Health Fund, and our focus is on, supporting things like direct services. And then we have our Healthy Democracy Fund, which has done a lot on that front in terms of the reproductive rights and working with ballot initiatives and things like that, that we're trying to really make sure that we're like providing both of those, because we know that people need that holistic approach in order for us to really serve and shift power in the ways that we're hoping to do, with the resources and the networks and things that Tides has. Um, I want to ask you, as a Black woman working on a ballot initiative in a state like Ohio, what were the challenges and pain points?
Yeah, I mean, I think, just for so many Black women, there's just so much weight put on our shoulders, especially when we enter spaces and we are the only one. Too often, we are the only one. For Ohio Women's Alliance, we were the only Black-led organization at the founding table, and so that is an enormous responsibility to hold. Just as you mentioned, there were so many eyes on Ohio. We knew that our work here would be viewed as a catalyst for other states, and other states are literally modeling what we did and how we approach the work here. I even get a lot of requests from out of state partners to share, just my knowledge and, the way that we approach the work here. And so it definitely was an enormous responsibility. It was a heavy weight. As as I mentioned, like had just given birth at the time. When it comes to maternal mortality rates. Ohio is like no, just like many other states across the country, where Black women are 2.5 more times likely to die than white women when giving birth during the postpartum a year after giving birth, and that is where I was at. I was in one of the most vulnerable phases of my life, and one of the number one causes for that is mental health. And so for me, I definitely had to prioritize my mental health a lot. When So often when you're the only one, you're always being tapped for all of the just so just to be represent so they can represent us and say that we do have Black women and people of color, in this work.
Hmm.
I can't answer I cannot answer every single, request that needs Black representation. Not only that, I'm only one person. I don't represent all Black folks.
Hmm.
So, it was a lot of boundary setting for me. Not feeling guilty when I needed to say no, when I was at capacity, and, prioritizing just my own ability to be able to, show up. But then also, there was some internalizing for me and guilt as well. I think we too often feel that as Black women because we feel like we have to save the world. Like if I don't do it, then who? But
Yeah,
life will go on, the world will still turn, and there are other people who can do that, and folks need to go find them. So, and it's additional labor on me too if you're asking me to go find them. So
mhm.
sometimes the answer is no and no. So, but
And no is a complete
that's
sentence.
right. That's right. And so
Hmm.
I'm thankful for the other women of color, on my team and who surrounded me and uplifted me. When I was tired, they were able to step in. Jordan, our deputy director at OWA, she was just incredible in the way that she showed up for the ballot measure. She ran our field programming, but she was also instrumental in prioritizing and uplifting and centering abortion storytellers. Jordan is so gracious, and the way that she shares her personal story. And I think that too had a major impact in like resonating with people and making sure that we're not just exploiting, the experiences of people and sharing stories that really provoke trigger warnings and things like that, but actually normalizing the experiences and the decisions around abortion access.
Absolutely. And I know that that I've heard Jordan share her story, and I've been really appreciative when Jordan does that, and when I hear the stories of other folks. And I appreciate the framing as well. Not everyone is sad and upset when they have made the decision to have an abortion, and I think that that framing is really important. And it there's always sort of like this narrative around pain, I think, when it um comes to black birthing people or black people in general. And I know I asked you what were like the challenges, with launching the ballot initiative, but I also want to hear about what were the obviously winning is a joyous moment, right? But like I also know, and correct me if I'm wrong, y'all did outreach to like 1 million people during this, and I just thought that was amazing, and that brought a lot of joy to me to know that like you were able to reach that many people, and that folks felt included, and that folks felt like somebody was coming to them to have a conversation with them about an issue that they care about. And so I want you to also talk about like what were the joyous points and moments during this whole process.
Yes, absolutely. To your point, when, making the decision to have an abortion, it is not a binary decision. It's not simply whether you want to have a child and or not. There's so many factors that go into making that decision. So, there is a lot of stigma around when, one has to make that choice, but then also there's a lot of stigma around just what Black women can endure, especially when it comes to our healthcare and pain and things like that. As if we can withstand, anything. We are depicted as strong, willed individuals. But, to your point, there's pain and there's joy. I think those two also intersect as well. Um, for me, when it came to the ballot measure, um, as I went into this campaign, the outcome for me was always going to be joy, whether we won or lose. And I think, for us, it was about determining what was that going to be that joyous moment for us. We determined our wins. I knew sitting at this table was a win within itself, to have representation, to have for people to know that there are Black women who are out loud and advocate for abortion access, regardless of the shame and stigma that is placed on us in our lives. Not just even around abortion, but even pregnancy. There's a lot of shame and stigma around Black women and choosing to even giving birth. Um, and also, I'm thinking about the ability for me to have those joyous moments. A lot of fights historically have, rested on the lives and the pain and the struggle of our work. A lot of the work that is celebrated today did not start out as a celebration. Even when we think about LGBTQ plus rights and pride, um, all of those fights started out as a struggle and rested on the shoulders of Black folks. And so for me, it's celebration, but celebrating the joy and the pain in that struggle and fight. Um, but yeah, I think we have to find joy. If we don't, how will we take care of ourselves? How can we, continue to be mentally whole and well? So, campaigns are really hard. There's these extreme highs and extreme lows, whether you win or lose. We call it campaign grief when the campaign's in, because you are, around a lot of people. You're getting a lot of recognition. There's a lot of adrenaline rush as you're, doing this work. It's kind of like a fight, 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 and then it's over, you know, and then people, leave, and they no longer feel the need of investment in your work and organization and your visibility. And so a lot of that is internalized, and sometimes it is personal, and you question like your existence and the work that you're doing. But for me, it's always about maintaining just perseverance and really investing in my people and my staff and letting them know, like, you are of value. We are here because of you. Other states are here because of you. And so no matter, what happens, when those people leave Ohio, after November elections, we still will be here. And guess what? We still will be pouring, loving, and caring and investing in each other. If nothing else, we still have each other. And that is always a win and a joyous moment for me.
Absolutely. And I mean, I don't think that we're going to see any of the advancements that we hope that will happen without staying in community with one another. And I think that's one of the things that we are really hoping to lean into right at Tides, and as part of our impact goal is like really um, working to resource those localized communities doing work on the ground who understand what's happening in their particular spaces. Like I mentioned, we have folks all across the country. We can't possibly know what's happening, you know, in Tulsa, Oklahoma, or in, some city in Florida. Like we can't know all of those things. And so our social change leaders, right, they know that information there in the communities every day doing the work. And it's important to provide like that sustained support. Um, One thing that you and I were talking the other day, and you said something that really resonated with me because when we were conceptualizing the Just Health Fund and what we wanted it to do, we really wanted it to, um, it's a health equity fund, right? But we really wanted those first cycles of funding to focus on reproductive justice and to support, local grassroots community health equity work. Um, and one of the things that I thought about was the lack of support for what we mentioned earlier, like direct services. And you said something. You said we can't legislate ourselves to freedom, and that's the way that I think about that, right? And I want you to expound on what you mean by that. Like we know that policy is a long game and it takes a long time. You mentioned the 30 restrictions that still are in place in Ohio around abortion access. So can you talk a little bit more about the importance of supporting um, direct services like you mentioned your member assistance program?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, yes, I say that all the time. We cannot, legislate our way to freedom and liberation. We know that even just the legislative system in the state was not designed to free all of us, and it was not designed to free Black folks. So that, is not a way for that. It also doesn't just resonates with the everyday average Black person, because we know that there's just so much historical harm when it comes to the legislative body, as well as laws that have been designed to disproportionately oppress and criminalize us. Um, Also, we did not find ourselves oppressed single-handedly. We did not place ourselves at the margins. And it was more than just the laws, it's also the systems, the institutions, the structure. There is also the, oppressive culture that has, really kept us, at the margins. So it's going to take more than one way to uplift our communities. It's going to take more than just policy. Yes, policy is one of those ways, but direct services is also another. It's also, our collective people voting power. It is also our purchasing power. It is educating other folks about the work in whichever field that we're doing. So it's that also that culture narrative change and the long-term destigmatizing work that we need to do as well. So it is a collective of the work that we need to do. We cannot just simply, think that there's just one path to freedom, because there isn't. And we need folks to show up in which way is best for them. We're not asking folks to do all things. You don't have to, you know, be a super woman or person, just do something. And that's, what I mainly tell folks. We approach the work in many dynamic and multifaceted ways. And I believe that we have to do that. I think as a Black woman, I'm saying like, you don't have to be super well, okay, but sometimes I feel like I have to be superwoman. Sometimes I feel like, I have to do approach things in more than one way to be effective. And that's just the dynamic, of the position I hold and just the story of so many other women of color. But
It's
I am thankful.
understanding that people don't lead like single issue lives, right? Um, and that because of that, there are so many different ways that this work must be approached in order for us to like be effective and sustain ourselves and eventually again see a future for ourselves and for the children that we're bringing in the world, or even if you're not bringing children in the world, you will nurture someone.
Right.
And so it's important for us to stay in this work. um I want to ask you, from my seat, what do you want funders to understand about the best ways to invest in the reproductive justice and movement work? Um, yeah, I want to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think you are a perfect model. Just what you said earlier, that there's, more than one ways to approach this work, and all of it's very important. I would say that, and then also be nimble and flexible in how people, especially grassroots people who are approaching the work, sometimes when we build out a project or a program, it may, initially look a certain way, but it may change. To be flexible in those changes. And usually those changes are for the greater good of not just the community, but the organization. And it's also an opportunity to learn. And so we can, be examples and models for others who want to, replicate that work. So just being, flexible, nimble, continue the investment. I would say multi-year investment as well. What I've witnessed, because I'm also like convener, collaborator. I also help build capacity for other grassroots leaders. And, lots of times, especially when it comes to Black folks in our community, there are these waves of investment and funding, especially when the political climate says funders should do so and prioritize Black people, especially during the pandemic and the racial uprising. And so there's like an influx in the investment of Black and Brown people, and then the money and the investment falls after that. And so I'm saying that to keep the dedicated commitment, if those are the priorities of the funder and the foundations, to center and uplift people of color, is not just during, when it's popular. We're always going to need that support and investment. And so the multi-year investment, and then just the wraparound coaching that some, organizational leaders need, and leadership development and understanding of like the nonprofit ecosystem. And when I say coaching and leadership development, that doesn't mean micromanaging and overly requesting um, meetings, and like, we are busy doing the good work, and so there's a level of trust that needs to be established there, and that we will continue that good work in our community as well. So I think overall I would say trust, transparency, grace, and nimbleness.
And staying in it, staying the course, right? Like you mentioned, when it's not popular anymore, all of the social problems that we're and social issues that we're experiencing right now did not happen overnight. And so one overnight investment is not going to help organizations like yours to really sustain in this work and really support community in ways that are meaningful. Um, One thing that you mentioned was just your work is like helping other grassroots leaders in the community to build capacity and things like that. One question that I wanted to ask you is, as like what we consider a social change leader, what's some top of mind advice that you would give people who are looking to sustain or expand their work?
I think the first thing I would say is to lean into abundance. I think that is so hard for people of color. You know, there is this scarcity. Um, it's not even a mindset. It is the culture that has been placed on us anyways, just because of many of our lived experiences and, you know, having such scarce resources in our community. But just leaning into abundance and believing in yourself and knowing that if you're doing that work, people will truly and definitely invest and that you're there for a reason to fill a need and a gap in the work that you're doing. And then also, um, you know, don't be afraid to um, pass the knowledge work on. You know, sometimes in scarcity, there's that holding on and grasping, keeping things close to the chest. And I know just from my own experience, I am only as good as I am with the more people who are involved, the more people who are involved in my life and work. It actually, you know, uplifts me more and it serves more people. And so that has been one of the things that I have learned, just making sure that I am lifting others as I'm doing this work along, sharing, you know, resources, information, and helping them, helping other grassroots leaders become stronger in their work as well.
Yeah, we have to do it with the collective. And I always appreciate how I see you show up in community with the information that you share and um, just helping other people sort of expand their leadership skills or just find the leader in themselves. Because not everybody believes or has been conditioned to believe that they can lead. Somebody actually asked a question. Queer Trans Project in the comments asked a question. I recently came across a quote saying, "Everyone's an activist. We need more organizers." What's your thoughts um, on that?
I agree. We need more people doing the organizing, which is making sure that we are, you know, not just standing on our own pedestal as activists, if you will. I'm not saying all activists are like this, okay? But just, you know, standing on our own pedestal, just screaming, you know, about the said issue, but actually including our communities and gathering people and actually really being strategic in how we are approaching those issues towards you know, getting more effective change. You know, work as an activist. Sorry, my phone froze. As an activist, because I think that's how many of us come to this work, because an issue is important to them. It's personal, but then there's growth from there and doing the, you know, the more community organizing work, if you will. And so I think there's a place for all of us. I think the first step is to activate people, and so that is good. But then, you know, we need to take them a step further in their activism. And again, that too is a collective responsibility.
Mhm. Absolutely. I know we're coming towards the end of our hour together, so I just want to give you some space to share anything that you want to share, you want people to know about you or about your work, your philosophy and approach, anything that you want to share.
Yeah, I think just for me, you know, when I started this work, I really did not know what I was doing. And I was just like, this is what needs to be done. And so I'm going to do it. And it really just started out with just me talking to a small group of people of what I felt, you know, platforms that didn't exist and that I wanted to build in our state. And then here I am, you know, we're approaching our 5 year anniversary on August 1st. And I cannot be more prouder of my own personal self. About 7 years ago, when I decided to dive into this work. No matter, how you feel, whether you feel like you're not good enough, because that has been my story lots of times. Like, why am I here? I'm not like this person. I'm not, good enough. Even mistakes that I've made, things that I felt like, maybe I misspoke or should. Listen, no one is perfect. What matters is that you showed up and that you are present and that you are there. The intention is what matters the most. And so that is what I've, learned along my journey, and just making sure that I'm always continuously investing and being open to others, especially our young people. Um, my staff, the majority of my staff are under the age of 30, and I'm 44. So, I feel, and they're just so amazing. I mean, like, I learn from them every single day, and they're like 20 something year olds.
About the Gen Z.
Yes, yes, shout out to them, and just reminders of that. They are the ones who I'm really doing this work for, those who are going to come, after us. And so we must be prioritizing and centering and uplifting their voices too in this work, just like myself as a Black woman who wants to be listened to and heard and represented and reflected. We need to be uplifting them as well.
Mhm.
Just making sure that remaining true to yourself, knowing you don't have to be all and everything, giving yourself grace, and making sure that we are always protecting those who are most marginalized, and including our young people.
Absolutely. It's important for us to really like build that tapestry, I think, across generations,
That's right.
and not leave anybody out because everybody has something meaningful to say, and we're all going to inherit, as I mentioned, like this work and the conditions of this world. And so, really, I know that sometimes Gen Z gets a bad rap, but they're just passionate, and some of the things that, we have endured over time, they're like, no, no, thank you. And I love that about them.
That's
So I'm glad that you mentioned that.
yeah.
And so with that, we're at the end of our time together, but I just want to thank you so much and give you your flowers, give Ohio Women's Alliance your flowers. I've seen you all grow over the years, and I'm just so appreciative of um, what you're doing here in Ohio and how you're, creating a blueprint and sharing that blueprint with other folks and bringing people along. And so we are just grateful for you. And so, just on behalf of Tides, I want to thank you for coming and chatting with us today.
Yes, thank you, Taria. Thank you, Thais, for just always uplifting us and just yeah, giving us more visibility. We appreciate y'all so, so much.
All right. Well,
All right.
thank you.
Bye.